Hello and welcome to week 6. So hopefully last week you enjoyed learning more about Bloom's taxonomy and that you enjoyed doing the Bloom's activity. So what I loved is that I saw several comments from students who said that they learned more about doing Bloom's taxonomy by actually doing this assignment. To me, there's no greater compliment than to know that a student really felt like they can apply the material and in the process that they truly understand it. So I hope that you enjoyed completing that project. I can't wait to look through all of them, and please don't forget to share them on the discussion board so that you can give your ideas to your classmates. And what's so great about doing that is that everyone comes up with something different, and so learning from each other is one of the greatest ways that we can become great teachers, because we have to understand that we don't have to do everything alone. We can certainly collaborate with each other. And so each person has a little different perspective and can bring something different to the table. So thanks so much for working so diligently on them. And I hope, as I said, that it was something that was a little more enjoyable and you didn't feel like it was so tedious. Instead, you had a chance to just be creative, but at the same time, learn and apply the material. So this week we're moving on to our next theorist, which is Jerome Bruner. So his name is not quite as common as some of the other ones that we have discussed, although you may have already interacted with this theory before now, but if not, hopefully you're going to get a good overview of it this week. So Bruner was a cognitive theorist, but what I loved just from reading the textbook, doing some additional research, and what I've learned over the years is that he truly understood the importance of letting his theory evolve. So as you go through the chapter and the readings, you're going to find that even he admits that he has changed his theory, modified it a few times based on what he had learned and what he had experienced. And sometimes the shift is in what he was focusing on. So what I did for you this week is I tried to find a couple of graphics that are going to help put his theory kind of into a visual context. The same resources are available. There's a PowerPoint, and there are a couple of videos embedded in the PowerPoint. One is an interview, and one is, it's actually a YouTube video that I found that two students had created going over the 3 modes of learning that Bruner talked about. And so sometimes it's kind of neat just to see it from a peer's perspective, because we're much more apt to do something hands-on and make it so that it actually makes sense, as opposed to just talking in these broad terms. So I found a quote that Bruner had in his book, Toward a Theory of Instruction. He really is focusing on the knowing. Knowing is a process, not a product. One of the things that I think is great from his theory is the spiral approach. And so when you read in the chapter and the other resources, you're going to find this is one of the differences between him and Piaget. Most people would think that Piaget and Bruner would be pretty similar because they are kind of both cognitive theorists, but this is one of the main differences, because if you remember, Piaget was a stage theorist, and he believed that children moved through those stages in a very systematic way, and that you never go backwards. And so what Bruner says is that's not actually the case. And so he really kind of engineered the spiral learning approach, and I'm a big fan of that because I think that it makes sense. So this was just a graphic that I found that just kind of explains that really what we're supposed to be doing from the youngest to the oldest is we're introducing topics, but we should be coming back to them over and over and over and over again. So we're making sure that they are grounded in the foundation before we actually move on to the next higher topic. So for instance, take multiplication. You cannot teach multiplication if children don't understand addition. So that's kind of where the spiral comes in. So children at a very young age are introduced to numbers. And so when we then get to addition, we're going to go back to talking about numbers. And then we're going to add to it by talking about the relationship between numbers. And then when we get to multiplication, we're going to go back to numbers, and then we're going to go back to the addition. So it's not that we're constantly reteaching, it's that we're retouching on things that have already been talked about in previous years, previous subjects by previous teachers at previous grades. So I personally am a big fan of the spiral approach because I just think it keeps the information fresh. I don't know about you, but I remember so many times being taught something in isolation and never hearing it again. And those are the things I don't remember. What I do remember is when we talked about something in third grade, and then we talked about it again in fourth grade, and then we talked about it again in fifth grade. Those are the things that are going to stick with you. And that's where that spiral learning approach comes in. So I really liked that graphic. But one of his main tenets of his theory is about these different types of learning modes. And so he has three: inactive, iconic, and symbolic. So as soon as I saw symbolic, I too thought about Piaget because of his symbolic representation. But really what Bruner is saying is that as children are learning, their thinking becomes more formal, more complex. So at a very young age, you're really, the inactive learning it's about play. It's about interacting with the materials. When you get to the iconic, now we're actually moving into images that can represent something. And then when we get to the symbolic, now we're actually able to use real symbols that stand for what it is. The thinking is more complex and more abstract. So I found this graphic that I thought was help us to put that into perspective. So when we're looking at addition, again, 3 plus 3, when we're looking at inactive, this is like those macaroni noodles. So children are playing with the macaroni noodles. And so this is how we are helping children become familiar with numbers and addition. So then when we move on to the iconic learning mode, now I can actually use symbols. So I have 3 yellow suns and I have 3 blue suns. I'm still teaching the same concept, but I don't have to play in order to do it. Now I can actually put pictures with it. But then when you get to symbolic, now I can actually use the numbers. So I thought this is just a really simple way to be able to help us remember that as children are going through these different learning modes, the way that they are learning is going to be a little bit different because of what their brain is actually able to process. So hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. So this is a chapter from one of Bruner's books. And so as always, to have a primary source is fantastic. And then here's the PowerPoint that goes along with the information about Bruner. And a short video that just kind of gives an overview of the theory. And then this was the website about Bruner from Simply Psychology that I thought did a really good job of breaking it down and really giving a nice overview of each aspect of his theory. So like I said, really what I'm hoping for each of these theorists is just to give you supplemental information to go along with the chapter in the textbook, but in different formats so that the information is going to stick with you whether or not you are an auditory, a visual, kinesthetic learner, because we know that it's important to figure out what type of learner we are. And then as always, you have your journal to complete for this week. So I will be spending this week trying to get caught up on all of the grading, getting through your journals. I'm most excited about going through your Bloom's taxonomy projects, and I can't wait to go through them and see your responses to each other. So next week is when we are scheduled to have your midterm. It is going to be done on Blackboard, and so it will be available for you when my next announcement comes through. So I hope that you have a fantastic week. Enjoy learning about Bruner. Don't be surprised when you're reading through and you're automatically connecting him to other theorists. That's exactly what should be happening. When you read that Bruner is really involved in language, then that should kind of register a memory that language was really important to Vygotsky. And you'll see some comparisons with Dewey. So what I love is we're getting to the point now where every new theorist that we talk about, we are automatically able to either compare them or contrast them to some of the other theorists that we've already talked about. And that to me is the ultimate purpose of this class, is to have such a solid foundation in all of these theories and theorists that you are able to start compartmentalizing them, as well as taking the aspects from each one that you truly believe are relevant and support your style of teaching and the way that you want your classroom set up. So have a great time learning about Bruner, and I will see you next week.